Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Gomez, and I'm the founder and CEO of Artsy. I'm usually behind the scenes. I'm usually working on tech stuff with the platform, so you don't see very much of my face. I'm surrounded with such beautiful people on my staff and as part of the Artsy team, but today you're going to get me. And one of the reasons is because I get to introduce one of my absolute favorite people and rock and roll, paving the way for other Filipinos and other creatives here in town in Las Vegas. And so very excited. So please help me welcome Walbert Castillo. Hey, Walbert, thank you so
Hi.
much for joining us. So now, Walbert, I met you probably a couple of years ago, and he was launching a new pop-up Filipino restaurant, which utilizes and incorporates in a very specific way pre-colonial Filipino ingredients and recipes. So very exciting, and that was revolutionary, and it was very exciting, not just for the Filipino people here in town, but for the culinary industry as a whole. So now, but in addition to that, he comes to us as an actual creative professional. Like he's a director, producer, documentarist. What do you call it? Documentary
Filmmaker,
filmmaker. There you go. Yes,
creative
and so
director.
creative director, all of the above. So Walbert, welcome, and
Thank
please
you.
tell us a little bit about what you've been up to these days.
Yeah,
You've been
yeah.
traveling the Philippines. You've been doing all sorts of things.
Living out of my suitcase for 7 weeks. No, well, thank you so much for having me, Rachel. And I'm so excited for an opportunity to sort of share my story, one that involves the culinary side as well. That story doesn't really stem from my background, right, as someone who comes from a journalism storytelling background, but I've learned so much through my research, through the people that I've worked with, and yeah, I just can't wait to share that with you.
So I think one of the exciting things, one of the interesting things since we've started Artsy, and I think is one of the part of the spirit behind Artsy, is that we recognize that as creatives, we usually do more than one thing. And so here he is. He came to us as a professional documentary filmmaker with Amazon, and he launched. He didn't just launch a concept; he launched an entire vision, and it's really transformed the way that we introduce food and history and culture. So it's so exciting for us. So tell me a little bit, like, how did you get started? Because as a filmmaker, right, that's a whole other side of your brain that you're trying to put together and produce, and then you have this other vision. It's this whole other calling that sort of said, "Come on, Walbert, let's move it into a different direction." So tell me a little bit about that story.
Yeah, so I think it really starts, the impetus is just feeling disconnected as a second generation Filipino American. And so growing up, oftentimes I was oftentimes curious about where I come from, my heritage. And I would surround myself with people who weren't Filipino, but also who were Filipino. So I had different community folks and friends across the board. But one of the things that I consistently thought of in the back of my mind was, how do I solve this problem of feeling disconnected? What is the solution? And so high school, college, post-college, I would join Filipino organizations. And the funny thing is, the thing that we all connected with, the thing that we all shared, was the fact that we were all feeling the same way. And so for me, it's always sat in the back of my mind. And until, 2 or 3 years ago, I didn't really know how to solve it until a trip to the Philippines. So about last year, I traveled to the Philippines to retrace my ancestral roots
Wow.
with my family. All of my cousins on my mom's side, from San Francisco, Hawaii, Chicago, New York, here, we all flew together to Mindanao. And we picked up our cousins in 2 to 3 pickup trucks, and we took an entire U across the Philippines. And so what was really exciting was that we met relatives, aunts and uncles, cousins, people I didn't even know existed. And along the way, I accidentally uncovered my great-grandfather's grave. Yeah,
Wow.
it was
Accidentally?
Yeah, accidentally. Yeah, it was there was moss and a sort of shrub that was just with the way that Filipinos and other Southeast Asian countries bury their loved ones. They do it from the bottom to the top, right? And
Right,
it's sort of stacked.
right.
And so for the longest time, because no one had visited my great grandfather, that grave was unseen.
Oh, wow.
And so we saw the top graves, but we didn't see the bottom. And so we lit a candle, and something came to me, something occurred, something told me to dig. And I found a bamboo stick, and I started digging, and then I found his name.
Wow,
And so
how exciting is that?
it was crazy. But when I came back from that trip, I thought to myself, I think I found my solution. Because I felt so proud to be Filipino-American by learning my own origin story, I thought, why not tell the origin story of our people? And so that's really where I started
it.
this journey of taking my background in journalism and injecting that into the way that Historia came about. Historia means story in English. And so really I'm looking at it at the lens of connecting those who don't know who they are, their identity. And how do I do that? Well, I start from the very beginning. And so, for me, pre-colonial Philippines was, a time and period where we saw and understood so many things. But for me, that's just one sliver of the pie. My eventual goal is to run through the gamut of history, start from chapter 1, and go through all the many chapters in history where we untangle the tapestry that is Philippine history. So I think because I come from a journalism background and storytelling is sort of my focal point, I think I'm coming at this restaurant business with a different lens. And I think when we serve food from island to table, we're doing it through storytelling. So we have the cooks, the chefs, the food runners, the servers, the typical staff that you sort of see at a restaurant. But the way I empower them is through the stories, the research, the travels, the memories that I've been able to essentially curate and really guide them in how we serve the food. So it's not just food that is dropped on a piece of plate to your table, it's food that comes with background.
Right. And I have to say, those, let's see, how many events have you had so far?
We've had about 6, and we're gonna have our 7th one in February.
Awesome, awesome. So we'll definitely keep you guys updated on that. But for those of you who haven't had a chance to experience it, not only is the food wonderful, so I'm Filipino, was born in the Philippines, came here when I was young, but was still very much entrenched in the Filipino culture. But I have to say it was more Filipino-American culture, right? It was very much an assimilated type of an experience growing up. So here, having this new concept to introduce some of our culinary, special dishes and everything is really exciting. But what I have to say that makes the experience different is the experience itself, because it is through the lens of storytelling. And you do a beautiful job of that, whether it is, the menu or how you are introducing the old native salts to the dishes and being able to discuss kind of the history behind all of that. That's really a whole other experience for foodies, right?
Yeah, foodies unite.
Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So I think what also really kind of interests me and what I love about your story, so you weren't born here, right? You weren't born in the Philippines.
I wasn't born in the Philippines, born in Chicago.
Oh, born in Chicago. Okay, so you never actually lived in the Philippines to experience it firsthand. So your experience was in the last so many years going back and then visiting multiple times, discovering your roots in that way. And it's interesting because here I was born in the Philippines. Went back to the Philippines every couple of years as a balikbayan, right? All of those words. And mom and dad were very much on Filipino culture, Filipino music, immerse the children. We can't lose this identity. So very, very interesting. But I was still kind of that sandwich generation. So even though I was born in the Philippines, I didn't culturally identify completely as Filipino. So we're kind of stuck in that middle. And here you were born here in the States and also went through not an identity crisis, but a question, right? A question of who am I and how much of my roots and my heritage and my ethnicity actually plays into who I am and what I do today. So that makes it really, really exciting. So now, one of my questions to you then is: you've got this beautiful new venture that you've not just taken on but are sharing with the world, right? But where does the filmmaker part come in now? Where does the whole Mr. Producer hat, Mr. Director, writer director hat, where is that playing in? Or do you, as a multi-creative, separate the two?
No, that's a really great question. So I think for me, it's always been about, as a journalist and someone who's had this passion for telling stories, it's always been about what skills can I unlock? What skills can I include in my toolkit? And so, as someone who would run across the newsroom to do a stand-up at the White House or the Supreme Court, and then run back to the office, edit, animate, illustrate, write the story, put it all together, publish, and then work with the reporter. I think being a journalist in that vein has taught me to be nimble, but to also learn all the skills that I can to make myself a multifaceted storyteller.
I love that.
And so, and it's funny because given my experience at USA Today for about 5 years, I've run through the gamut of not only the skills that I've been able to apply to the stories that I tell, I've been able to focus on different narratives and different types of stories. So whether it was collaborating with the investigations team or the internationals sort of world foreign team or the breaking news team, every sort of lens that I've been able to put myself in, it's been an amalgamation of how quick can I be on my toes to make sure that the story goes out.
Sure.
And so all of that experience I've just had in the back of my mind. It's sort of that purview that I've had within the industry. Working at Amazon, specifically the marketing team of AWS, I've realized that my skills of editing, my skills of animating, aren't necessarily being used as much anymore. For me, it's all about ideating the stories, ideating the documentaries. In my day-to-day role, I pitch ideas actively, and if those ideas are greenlit, then I'm sort of the one acting on those ideas, working with stakeholders to obtain a budget. And with those funds, I essentially get to hire the creative agency that executes the idea that I came up with. So at that sort of focal point, that sort of period of time, it's no longer me editing or illustrating, it's me guiding the creative. It's me working with an agency to sort of build the vision from the ground up and execute.
Sure.
So the documentary series that I had worked on, Climate Next, where we went around the world and we looked at people using technology to combat climate change, that's now on Prime Video. But that was an idea that, I had to plant the seed and then work with the agency and the creative team to figure out, okay, who does what? And for me, it's all about empowering the people that I know do well in those roles. So you have me being the creative director, but then you have the director of photography, the editor, the sound editor, the illustrator, all the things that might be, right? The fixer, et cetera. And so that experience has really helped carve out this new skill of putting people where their talents lie, hence Historia.
I love that.
So for me, I think being the creative director that I am, I'm able to identify which individuals are talented, where are their passions? And if I can empower their passions into a role that they can carve out themselves, then I feel that I'm doing them justice. I feel that I'm helping them thrive in their own craft. And so, yeah, it's been exciting because we have folks who are video strategists, we have illustrators, but because I have that skill, I'm also able to provide the kind of feedback that we need to get the post of validation, the post of approval, the post of the creative, the thing that needs to be created is also backed by this level of skill set that I have.
I love that. So now I have to ask, because you're wearing multiple hats in all of these, right? So do you have a favorite role that you play then? I mean, it's you get to not only create, you get to develop skill set, you get to motivate, you get to inspire, all of these. Is there a favorite role for you personally that you enjoy the most?
I think really it's bringing together the team. I like bringing the Avengers together. Yeah, it's kind of funny. Yeah, no, but I really, because I realize that I know I fall short or I lack the skills in certain spaces, and I know that I can't do everything. But when I find people that I can learn from, and I know that their talents lie in that sort of skill set or that industry because that is their expertise, then I feel that the pie is complete.
Right. I love that. I love that. Okay, so who's your Thor? No.
Sunshine.
Ah, there you go. I love it. I love it. Woohoo! Shout out, Sunshine.
Let's go.
And then of all the different projects that you've worked on, do you have, aside from Historia, just as a, not just as a, but as a creative director, do you have a favorite project? Was there one in particular that really stands out to you?
Out of all the works that I've done throughout my experience, I think the one that really stands out is this documentary that I had worked on at USA Today that highlighted Filipino World War II veterans. And so that was a really intriguing and intricate story because just for some background and context, the Philippines was an ally to the US during World War II, and they were promised all these benefits, citizenship, health, pension, you name it. President Truman, toward the end of the war, after they had helped, revoked all of their benefits.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And they were one of the only countries who were an ally to get revoked of those
Wow.
benefits. And so for 70 plus years, Filipino veterans were fighting to be recognized for their wartime sacrifices.
Wow.
They would chain themselves to the White House fence
Wow.
in an act of protest,
Act of protest, sure.
to let the president know that this is something that's still top of mind 70 years down the line.
Wow. Is that video available for people to
It
view
is.
and to purchase?
It
Yes.
is,
How
yeah.
can we
At
find
USA
that and view it on USA Today?
Yeah. And I can share that link, but the thing that was really exciting was that my grandfather was a lieutenant in the Army. And so not only did I get to cover this story interviewing veterans in DC, but I also got to do something special. So one of the last things that President Obama had done before his presidency ended, he signed a bill that became a law that essentially recognized all Filipino World War II veterans for their sacrifices. And if they weren't alive, their family would receive a gold medal on behalf of those sacrifices. So I was at the Capitol covering this monumental story, this bipartisan sort of milestone event. And not only did I get to capture this story, publish it, report it for USA Today, but I also got to accept the gold medal on my grandfather's behalf.
Yay! What
Yeah.
an honor. That
Yeah,
is very, very
and so it
cool.
really came full circle because no one in the
Full circle.
newsroom was gonna do that story except me.
Wow. That's a beautiful story to share. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I can see why it's so special to you.
What's really amazing too with storytelling is this ability to provide transparency and visibility. So after that story had come out, there was an awakening. People that didn't know this event had happened were able to notify the Capitol that their grandfather, their father
I love that.
served, and then they received the gold medal in the mail.
And it's interesting because so much is lost in history, right? Today, it's information, just we get it so fast, and we can Google, we can, all of these areas where we can research our history. And so I think a lot of those stories are lost. And so be able to bring light to them and and bring life to the people, especially in our history, right? Our lineage. I mean, that's just such an honor. So thank you so much for sharing that. That's really exciting. Yeah, and we'll make sure to share that. And you know, it's one of those things where there's so many stories told about World War II veterans, right? So many different documentaries, but they can all have a different voice. They can all have a different lens, and this is just another one to add to that. So very excited. Hope I get to watch that soon.
Yeah,
So
I'll have to
yeah,
send it your way.
absolutely.
There's so much
Yes.
about our past that, oftentimes we don't know or don't recognize. So I think it's very cyclical. I think everything that I've done up until this point has all led to why I'm doing what I do today.
I love that. I love that. Okay, so the next question is what next? Because you're filmmaker extraordinaire and you're pop-up restaurateur extraordinaire. What do they, I see that they cross, but are you looking to move them as different projects, or are you looking to create one big sort of a venture to combine them both?
In the future, I would love to have a brick and mortar for Historia. But I think right now we're just building the brand identity and like letting people know who we are. I know that what we're doing is really special, and the type of experiential sort of dining that you get with our cuisine is something that I would say not a lot of Filipino restaurants are currently doing in the space. And so you see these fine dining Filipino restaurants in Chicago and New York and LA and Texas. And I've actually had people ask me, when are you going to open this up? I want to take my time, and I want to do it in the right way. And I think as we continue to build that and we take our time, the stories will also develop as well. What do I see in the future? I'm going to continue balancing my 9 to 5 because it's what helps finance the pop-up
Sure,
dinners.
but you're also a great
Yeah, yeah.
storyteller. So
Oh,
it's like
thank
you
you.
don't want to close the
Exactly.
one talent, right? To
So
pursue another. So
it
yeah.
is. I find a lot of pride in wanting to tell the stories for the foods and the chapters that we sort of shine a light with in Historia. First chapter was pre-colonial. Second chapter right now is Chinese Filipino. For folks listening, the oldest Chinatown in the world actually happens to belong to the Philippines.
Oh,
In
wow.
Manila.
Wow.
And then chapter 3, who knows, we might see Muslim Filipino. Chapter 4, we might see Malay or Indian Filipino. And then 5, Spanish Filipino. And then Japanese Filipino, US Filipino. And then you bring it back home.
So I want to make sure that
Yeah.
that I'm getting the historical timeline
Yeah.
correct as well. So pre-colonial. So for those that aren't familiar, the Philippines was colonized by the Spaniards for 300 years, and so we were given or liberated in 1905. I think it was right about 1905. And but for 300 years, so much of our culture was influenced by the Spanish. So pre-colonial then would predate that. So prior to the 1600s, is that the sort of the recipes and the culture that you're trying to infuse?
Yeah,
When you say-
I think what we'll find is we're not going to find a finite timeline for certain events that'll take place across history. I think there will be a blend of it for sure, pre, during, and post. What I find so interesting with the second chapter, the Filipinos have been trading with China as early as the 9th and 10th centuries.
Oh, wow.
So prior to the Spanish setting foot on the islands. However, the oldest Chinatown in the world was established by the Spanish as a means for the Chinese to convert to Catholicism, and they put them in this area.
Huh.
It's so interesting.
And then trade with spices and all of those, right?
Of course. So the Chinese chapter, while we are going in this sequential chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, every chapter will be a deep dive on what we've seen across, rather than being a linear sort of point in history.
Right.
That makes sense, because the Chinese influence, it continues. The oldest Chinatown in the world continues to thrive today. And so we're seeing those dishes in the present day world, but we're seeing the dishes that came during the Spanish. An example of that, empanadas, right? So empanadas
Love
is
empanadas.
a classical dish, but it is one of the few dishes that actually show a blend of Spanish influence, Chinese influence, and Filipino influence all together. So if you go to Binondo, that's the oldest Chinatown in the world, you'll see this restaurant, Quick Snack. Quick Snack, they serve empanadas, but what you'll find in the inside are chives, tofu, ingredients from the Chinese culture, and then chicken meat from the Filipino culture. But then on the outside, the Spanish culture is very inherently present. So this classical example of a Spanish-looking dish has traits of both Chinese and Filipino in the inside.
Very cool.
And so we're going to see that throughout history.
Sure. So I'm going to geek out for a second here, right, with the geography of the Philippines, because the Philippines is strategically located Southeast Asia, and so there's a lot of trade that happened there. But the Philippines itself is really made up of three main islands. And so you're from the Mindanao region, which is the southernmost island. I was born in Manila in Luzon, which is that the larger?
The northern.
The northern. And so I'm kind of curious because how trade happened at the time. If they took the southern route, right, then the influences you would see more in Mindanao versus if they took the northern route, which we would then see in Manila. Are you seeing a difference? Okay, geeking out again, right?
Yeah.
Are you seeing a difference in terms of the spices and the influences in those foods as you travel throughout the Philippines, the south versus the north?
Of course, yeah. So adobo is a really prime example of a dish that you see being different in any mother's or grandmother's home.
There's like 10
that you
different
visit.
recipes for adobo.
200, 300.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Wow.
so many different recipes.
Wow.
A friend of mine, Chef Cloud, he introduced sisig and adobo to Anthony Bourdain, and he has a book called The Filipino Adobo, which spans 300 plus ingredients.
Oh, I'll have to see that, yeah.
Yeah, or 300 plus recipes for adobo, and how it sort of changes from the north to the south. Sweeter, more vinegar, more sugar,
Right.
more black beans, more soy sauce. There's so many different variations.
I love that.
One thing I've learned too is what's so interesting is that we are familiar with sinigang, right? That comfort sort of soup that you sort of see the tamarind. It's very much there. We saw that in the north, but in the south and the Visayas area, we didn't see sinigang. We saw tinola.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
So you'll find that
Ginger.
different ingredients based on the galleon trade, based on the way that the maritime trading had taken place across years with the Chinese, with the Muslims, with the Indian, Malay, you name it. I think what you'll find is a different pedigree of so many ingredients all across the board geographically.
Sure.
Yeah. And it's
Very
so crazy to
cool.
think because I think way back when the Philippines didn't see itself, before it was called the Philippines, it didn't see itself as one country. It were separate kingdoms, separate, entities. And Mindanao.
At one time, I think we were Mariana Islands. Weren't we considered part of the Marianas?
I'm not entirely
Yeah.
sure on that, but that's very interesting.
Yeah.
If that was the case.
Yeah, it's a different conversation, right? But there's this whole thing with Filipinos: are we Oriental? How Asian are we? And some view us as more as historically as part of the Malay race, or closer to Indonesia in terms of definitely not culture and politics, but just in terms of likeness, right? And then
Yeah,
some
and
of the
some-
earlier historical stuff. So
Some of the borrowings from the
borrowings,
etymology of some of the words.
yes,
We
yes,
share
yes.
similar words like asin, like salt. It's crazy, yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Boy, we have to delve a little bit more into old Filipino
So many
history.
things,
Yeah,
so many
there's
things.
so many things.
You can only cover so much.
I
So that's why we
know,
do
I know.
4 dinners
I
for
love
every
that.
chapter before we go on to the next one.
I love that. So, so we finished pre-colonial. We're moving into the Chinese influence. Have you completed that, or that's the next?
That's we're halfway into it right now.
Halfway, okay.
And our next dinner will celebrate Chinese New Year, February 27th.
Awesome,
So it's
awesome.
going to be a really exciting event that we'll have. We're going to try to do the line dance. We're going to try to get some performers involved and sort of have that be a milestone celebration
Awesome.
for
Where will you have that?
Taverna Costera
Oh yeah,
at the Arts
very
District.
familiar. Love
Yeah.
that place.
Yeah.
Plug. Love that place. Last year's Chinese New Year, we had it at the big one of the big celebrations over at the iconic Chinatown Archway, down in
Spring Mountain.
Spring Mountain,
Yes,
right,
yes,
right.
yes, yes.
And
That plaza
the
over
plaza,
there. Yeah, yeah.
exactly. And so they hosted it, and I want to say there were probably 6,000 people. I emceed the show and stage director, but there were about 6,000 people in attendance, and we had maybe 30 really wonderful cultural groups that came and shared costume and dance and music, and it was pretty exciting. So are you going to be able to incorporate some of the local talent
I would
with
love to incorporate some of the local
Okay.
talent. Right now, I'm trying to get local lion dance involved and sort of be a part of that. But as someone who is still new to Vegas, at the same time, I would love to get connected to folks in that
Oh,
community and sort of
absolutely.
see if, like, oh, maybe I can have you perform.
I probably still have their phone numbers in my phone, so we'll
Let's
make
go.
sure to chat
Let's make it
afterwards.
happen. And this is great because what you'll find in Vegas too is all about the networking and the connections that you make. And honestly, I think for us, being able to establish that in some way, shape, or form. So many of us are multifaceted creatives, but it's hard to find a time and place to come together, right? And so that's why I really enjoy what you all are doing with Artsy, because there's this opportunity to really connect.
Thank you. Yeah, and we're really excited about it. Artsy, when we first started, we recognized that our reach was really far and wide. We had animation producers that had a lot of connections to Mexico, where a lot of the talented digital artists reside. We have, of course, talent in the Philippines, in other countries, but we were featuring people on Broadway. We were featuring people, illustrators in San Antonio. We have filmmakers in LA, and it was, I don't want to say it was easy, but it was interesting how the circle just became smaller. It was clear that there's a sense of community, and we were just offering a platform so it would just be easier for people to connect, right? And for people to be accessible. But then we fast forwarded it, and I kept getting hit with a question what about Vegas? What about Vegas? We have so much here in Vegas. And I thought, that's a really good point. On my 9 to 5 as a business consultant, we're very much about the growth here in Las Vegas and introducing new industries to town. So it's very clear to see what our growth looks like. But then when it comes to arts and entertainment, we have so many different pockets. We've got the multi-creatives, we've got the filmmakers, film studios coming in from all these tax credits, which means talent, producers, writers,
Yeah.
extras, all of these. We have a reality show. I was honored to be able to introduce a new reality show shooting here in Las Vegas earlier today, and there's just so much happening. So it's like, let's focus on Las Vegas for a little bit and really highlight what we have to offer and just spread that out into the rest of the community. But we are, the arts and entertainment and the creative community we are wide and vast and deep, but we're also a small community. And so it's really,
100%.
really cute. So I love that Artsy is going to be able to provide that, and my phone with all of those connections that I can share with you for your next project.
It's also
Yeah.
a blank canvas too. I feel like Vegas has this ability to come up with new ideas, and it's not as saturated. I see that with the Filipino restaurant sort of sphere that's apparently inherently there with DC and New York and Chicago and LA. But I feel like here there's an opportunity, and I see that equally as important in the creative vein as well.
Absolutely. And I think one of the great things with Vegas today is we are in that mode of we can try anything we want. right? Because
Yeah.
everything, it is a blank
No
canvas.
sky's the limit, and you can be
Right.
super experiential. You can be,
Absolutely.
yeah,
And
the
that doesn't,
craziest.
and it
Yeah.
doesn't exist in a lot of areas because LA is pretty much, film, and it is what it is. New York with classical arts, it is what it is, and things are deeply entrenched, and there's a way that you go through the process, and we don't have to do that here, and we can sort of reinvent it. And really, with the beauty of technology, we can reinvent it. We can say, our process is going to be quicker and shorter and easier, and you're going to feel more connected, and you're going to have easier access, and it's just a different time. So we're excited to be able to do it, and then to be able to share it and to be able to experience what you are doing here in town is really, really exciting. So now I have a fun little question to ask you. So, and here you are, a filmmaker, Mr. Creative Producer, Director / Writer / everything. So now you are creating a movie about yourself, including Historia, including your vision, your passion. It's about, the beauty in the mind of Walbert. So what is your background music playing?
Ooh. I would say Beethoven's Piano Sonata Number 23 in F minor.
23 F minor. Oh, I don't know that one. Can you hum a few bars?
It's like it starts off fast, but then it goes slow. There's definitely peaks and valleys as far as the song would go, but I actually come from a classical music background. I used to play classical music, as you know, as we've seen in the
so I was going to save that
party.
for the very end.
Yeah.
So Walbert graced us last year. We had a holiday party while we were just launching Artsy, just launching Historia. I was like, hey, Christmas party at Rachel's house, right? And he comes and he sits down at my beautiful antique piano, which doesn't get played as often as it should, and he just starts playing this beautiful classical piece that turns out that he wrote and he composed and won an award for in composition. Yes. So please tell us about that because I love that.
So I wish I wrote it, but I did win an award.
Okay.
But yeah, I should write my own music.
Yeah.
But no, before I even got into storytelling, music was always sort of my thing. And so I did a lot of classical piano growing up, and I competed across the Midwest. So that was just like a really awesome opportunity for me to learn what that piece of multimedia looked like. And till this day, I still consider music just being top of mind whenever I select a soundtrack for a documentary that I'm working on. And I have that visibility in that space, and I feel like I said, the whole toolkit.
Sure.
I feel like that's just like another element that I'm able to grab from that toolkit because of my backgrounds.
Does it tend to be all instrumental in the background? Do you have any Filipino rondalia music?
Rondalia, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
By my aunt and uncle.
Yeah, exactly.
No, actually it's just...
I can dance Dinny Kling.
No, it's so funny. And the thing is, music has always been so prevalent in my life. And people will question, but I can't work, I can't edit, I can't do this without listening to music in the background.
Really?
Yeah, I always have to have something on. And so that's just sort of how I operate in the space. My manager at USA Today, he would always grab my headphones. He's like, what song are you listening to now? You shouldn't listen to music while you edit. And I was like, this is how I go into the editing mode. So that was just always an interesting tidbit of mine. But yeah, I think that's sort of how, like I said, music, it's connected.
So it's interesting that you mentioned about needing music in the background. So I started, a little bit of information on me, I started playing piano at 5, guitar in the 3rd grade, I led the masses, all of these different things, and then trained classically vocally, and then sang in bands. And so music has always been, and still to this day, a big part of my life. But I can't have music in the background because it makes me think of work. So it's interesting that you can't work without music in the background, and I can't have music in the background because I can't focus. I can't focus on anything else. So
That's
that was
so
interesting.
interesting. That's so
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, wow. I think the uniqueness of that is everyone works differently. Everyone is their own self, right? And you know, to put yourself in that mindset, right? That's another thing. I think everyone has their own, you know, fallback, right? Everyone
Yeah.
has their complement, and
Well, and
yeah,
for me, having music in the background makes me think like, oh gosh, I haven't vocalized, I haven't played the piano in a while, I haven't practiced. So that's how I
yeah.
think of it.
Oh,
But
that's so interesting.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So
yeah.
what next? So tell us about, you've told us about Astoria, the timeline. Will you please share kind of the schedule and where we can find you? And I want to
Yeah.
make sure that, that we get to put it out there and help promote that for you.
Of course. So the next event is going to be on February 27th at Taverna Costera in the Arts District. It'll be our third dinner where we highlight Chinese Filipino food. It's named Binondo after the world's oldest Chinatown. Dinners 3 and 4, and then move on to the next chapter. We recently found out that we landed a vendor spot at the Super Bowl. So we'll be there
Oh
on
my
February
gosh, how
6th
exciting.
on Media Day. Yeah, it'll be the first time Historia will be doing outdoor vending. Um,
Wow. Will
and
you have a set menu that you're
we'll
going to be
have
offering?
we'll have a one dish sort of. We're still thinking about it. We have some ideas,
How
we're
exciting.
going to be passing out the one dish to I think 500 to 600 people for Media Day. So that'll
Wow,
be
that's awesome.
exciting. And then we're going to have our first non-Vegas dinner in San Francisco. We're going to be having a dinner at the Philippine Embassy
Oh,
in San
wonderful.
Francisco, a prefix Kamayan dinner that'll celebrate Filipino history throughout the ages.
I love
And
it.
so we're going to do a 3-night, one dinner per night sort of approach.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so it's going to be an exciting year because my goal this year, we're going to have 2 more dinners that will consist of them being outside of Vegas. We're going to go into chapter 3 and hopefully a bit of chapter 4. Another trip to the Philippines, I think in Q2. And then just, I think what we want to do is continue to be a voice for the community and find ways that we can expand our reach. So
I love that.
not only are we going to focus on our pop-up dinners, but we're also going to focus on private dinners. We're going to focus on engaging the youth, UNLV, FASA, CSN, seeing if there are opportunities to pop up with them.
Yeah.
I think this year is going to come with a lot of collaboration.
I love that. And so tell us, so far, what is your favorite dish?
Ooh, so far, what is my favorite dish? I would say the Pyanggang chicken,
Oh,
the pre-colonial Filipino like burnt chicken. It's not really burnt, but that's my favorite
I
because
remember that it was delicious.
yeah, it's so exciting because just like a dish that we see and love today, I love it, dinuguan. It's a dish that oftentimes people want to veer away from, but I think with Pyanggang manok, Pyanggang chicken, it also breeds that sense of stimulus that comes with food that looks black, and you're like,
It's very
oh,
earthy.
earthy, very earthy. I'm
Yeah.
not sure what that is.
Sure.
I like that element of surprise, and I think for me, I'm typically a person that goes in with no expectations, and I want to get surprised by something that I have. And so when I tried that, and I have that on seeing that unearthed itself on our menu, I was like, wow, like
Wow.
I'm thoroughly surprised.
So it's interesting that you say surprise in the dishes, right?
Yeah.
And then your own personal experience in response to it. So with this entire venture that you've taken on, an adventure you've taken on, what has been the biggest surprise for you?
The biggest surprise is how fast we've been able to grow as a team together. That is beyond, when I had this idea, I wasn't sure where it would go. And for me, it was more about planting the seed. I had mentioned this earlier, but planting the seed and seeing where it grows. Of course, when I first announced Historia, it wasn't perfect by any means, and it still isn't perfect. Just like any app that you release into the market, you release an MVP, the minimum viable product. And so like for me, I felt like, why wait for something to make it perfect when you can just put out the first thing and improve it as you go. And so the thing is, like, what has surprised me the most was how much we've grown in the way that we are learning about the history, how we've grown as a team, how we've grown, to the community. I think there's so many learnings there, and I would say yes, that's. And also the other thing that I've been surprised about is like the history. I didn't know that adobo was pre-colonial, and that like the reason why it was pre-colonial, or the reason why it was named adobo, was because the Spanish had stepped foot on the islands, named it that dish because it's something that they have in their palate.
Sure.
But you'll quickly realize that marinating and simmering with vinegar has always been in our palate.
Right.
Prior to the 300-year-long Spanish colonization. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's just, I think I'm learning every single day
That is exciting.
about who I am. And so I'm on this journey. It was solo, but now it's a village.
Oh, I
Yeah.
love that. And I have to say, when you talk about MVP and just starting, right, and just starting, not waiting for it to be perfect, I remembered when you first started. And even though it may have felt like you were not prepared or not fully ready, I have to say, on the outside and experiencing it with you, it felt very well thought out. You could tell that it was a passion, and it was something that he was curating along the way, and it was really exciting to be part of that. So I'm
thank
very
you.
excited that we
Thank
get to be
you.
part of your journey.
Salamat.
And thank you so
Yeah,
much for
yeah.
spending the time with us today. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Rachel.
Okay, take care.